Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today you may be shocked to discover that we are talking about The Secret Garden because, you can't read. So, The Secret Garden is, of course, one of those great classics. It's been made into movies. The most recent iteration, I think it was fairly well received. The Secret Garden was not my favorite of Frances Hodgson Burnett's books. And you may recognize the font and even the drawing style of Gareth Floyd. That's because the edition I have of Little Lord Fauntleroy and The Secret Garden is actually a 3-in-1 book. It's a large book that has all 3 novels in it: Secret Garden, A Little Princess, and Little Lord Fauntleroy. What I have in fact done is, when I did Little Lord Fauntleroy, all those many moons ago, I took part of the cover and the Little Lord Fauntleroy title and sort of mixed them together, hooked them together so that I would have a separate cover for it. The actual cover of this book, or rather the dust jacket, because this is hardcover, and if you look at the actual cover as opposed to the dust jacket, it's just red cloth. But the actual cover will be a surprise for when I finally get around to doing A Little Princess. I am going to be showing you the pictures in this because, frankly, I suspect that this particular edition, which was printed in 1978 by Octopus Books Limited and was printed in Czechoslovakia, back when Czechoslovakia was a thing. Those of you, however few of you are listening to this who are too young, will not remember Czechoslovakia. You will only remember the Czech and the Slovak republics that we have now, but there was a time when the Czechs and the Slovaks had been forced into a single country and were Czechoslovakia. In any event, so this is an edition from 1978, and The Secret Garden was initially published in 1911. So this is an old book, and the physical book is not a particularly young book either. I actually have access to a different edition than this one at home, but that one doesn't have the same illustrations, and this is the one that I grew up reading, and it's the one that I love because I love pretty pictures. So this is the real title page for The Secret Garden. You may notice the watermarks. That's because, once again, there was scanner, computer, lack of driver issue things. I just really, really like good illustrations in books, and I like this pen and ink style and the looseness of the drawings and the way that it's a lot of loose, scribbly lines that come together to make a picture. It's not, careful, single, hard line drawings. Anyways, Secret Garden. Let's talk about the actual book. This book starts, like A Little Princess, with a girl coming from India. But unlike A Little Princess, which, yes, as I have said, I will get around to doing that. But in this book, the title character, the lead character, Mary Lennox, is a very small, odd, little black figure. She is raised by she has absentee parents. They're the kinds of people who shouldn't be allowed to have children because they're the kinds of people who have a child because they think they should, or because they think it will be a fun romp to have a kid. And when they discover that children are loud and noisy and sniffly and cry a lot and aren't really any fun to be around for, years and years and years, they tend to abandon those children, and if they're wealthy enough, they abandon them to nurses. But Mary Lennox's family is they're wealthy enough to have nurses, to have an Indian ayah. But these are probably low caste Indians, and I am using Indian in the turn of phrase to mean people from the, Southern Asian section of the continent, the country of India. These are probably low caste Indians who have been sufficiently cowed and know that their positions and their livelihoods depend on, not upsetting the girl and not upsetting her parents. And so Mary Lennox grows up isolated and spoiled and surrounded by people who, basically do whatever she wants all the time. And so she grows up into a sour, selfish child. And so when her parents die of cholera, when basically everyone she knows in India dies of cholera, it doesn't affect her emotionally because her mother, the Mem Sahib, she doesn't know her mother. Her mother is just a pretty woman in flowy dresses that she likes to look at in the distance because she doesn't know her. And her mother is clearly a flighty, foolish creature. And so Mary Lennox gets sent to stay with her uncle, Archibald Craven, who has some sort of a hunchback and lives out in the country, although he comes across, if you read the book carefully, as just a very sad, lonely, not bad-looking man who was just broken by his wife's death, absolutely broken by it. And he's not a bad person, he's just one of those people who was broken by something terrible happening in his life. And when Mary Lennox first arrives, she's, sour. She doesn't like people, but that's partly because she's either spent her whole life being either completely ignored or been slavishly attended to, and no one has ever treated her like an equal or another person. And so she doesn't know how to talk to people. She doesn't even understand the basics of the master-servant relationship in England at the turn of the last century, which, master-servant relationships, there's a lot of servility involved, a lot of you'd better know your place, but not like what she's used to. And so, when she gets taken, and when she gets taken away and brought to Yorkshire, at first she hates it. It's nothing like what she's used to, and Mrs. Medlock, the head housekeeper, is sharp with her and openly says, well, you're a sour-looking little ugly creature. But she meets Martha, who I don't have a picture of. This is a picture of Mrs. Medlock yelling at her for wandering around where she's not supposed to be. But she meets her servant Martha, who doesn't act properly. The book makes it very, very clear that Martha does not act properly. But it's the first time in her life that somebody tells that when she starts freaking out and shouting, you pig, you daughter of a pig! It's the first time in her life that somebody snaps back at her and says, don't you do that to me. And so Martha is really the first person to give Mary some sort of structure, some sort of equal to talk to, because she's never had that. And a large portion of this book is about Mary's discoveries, about her discovery of Ben Weatherstaff, who just talks to her straight, just gives it to her straight, about her meeting up with Colin, her cousin Colin, Archibald Craven's son, who, like Mary, has been spoiled his whole life. He's been told ever since he was a small child, and now the two of them are only 10 years old, but ever since he was a baby, everyone has basically said, oh, well, he's going to have a hunchback and die. He's going to die. And one of the things he tells her is, You know, they all think I can't listen, but I know they all say I'm going to die, so I'm gonna die. And this whole book, a lot of this is about the power of positive thinking, but it's also about the power of not letting children have their way about everything, about teaching children about interacting with other people, about how it's important to deal with other people. We are a sociable species, and it's important for most people's mental well-being to have contact with other human beings. That's why I'm so weird. I don't talk to anybody ever. I am sad and alone. As this book goes on, Mary meets up with Dickon. We show him in the picture here. And Dickon, who is Martha's younger brother, he has a gift with animals. He's very good at finding animals and communicating with them and taming them. And Dickon is one of Mary's big teachers and Colin's teachers in that he's the first person about their age that they spend time with. Mary spent some time with other children her age earlier in the book, but she's not used to other children, and so when they're loud and they're boisterous, she doesn't know how to handle it. She doesn't know what they're doing, and it's confusing and irritating because she spent her whole life surrounded by adults, servants, but adults, and people who do not harass her and do not poke and prod and tease. And Dickon doesn't either. And so he provides that transition almost for the pair of them of somebody, again, of an equal, of someone who will talk to them and is genuinely interested in what either of them has to say. Not, you know, I am a servant and so you are the mistress or the master because in your parents' absence you're the one in charge, and if you say the word I will be fired sort of paying attention, but someone who actually cares about what you're interested in. That he actually cares about Colin and Mary's interest in plants, in animals, in the moors, in Yorkshire at large. In Mary's interest in learning the Yorkshire dialect, which she takes an interest in, a very intellectual interest, in which she compares it to learning dialects in India, where she says only the most intelligent people learn dialects and they are highly respected. And so while it's very, very funny because one can absolutely imagine a little girl speaking with the perfect received pronunciation accent, "Oh, is it Wick? I am so ever so glad it is Wick," which sounds just about as bad as it would if I said wanker with my North American accent. But this book is very much about them discovering how to live in the world, how to go out into the world, how to be people in the world and interact with others, and about not giving in to despair. There is also a lot of what I would call New Age palaver. For all that this book was written in 1911, there's a lot of what Colin says, and I forgive him because he is only 10, that is the kind of tomfoolery that people who want to imagine that they are spiritual and think that they are possessed by the wolf spirit of Merlin, don't ask, there was a television special once, and those people who sometimes don't quite seem to understand what they're talking about. There's a lot of that in here. But it boils down in this book to just learning about, to just discovering the world outside of yourself. And that's what this book is so good for. It's good for a lot of beautiful prose about how the garden looks and how it feels to stand there in the spring, and this moment where she describes those times when you realize you're going to live forever and ever. And this isn't my favorite of her books, but there's just some really, really beautiful stuff in this, and I will always recommend it. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.